a little late, but okay, just in case I need to post this later on. So do you have any questions in regards to what the course is about?
Nope.
Okay.
Not as of yet.
All right.
Yeah, no questions yet.
Makes sense so far.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, so I'm sure there'll be more questions later on as we move along. So I'm just going to share my screen with you and go over some of the items that logistical items of the course. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. So a voice confirmation is really good here from you. So for week 1, I have posted a short lecture note on the mind-body problem. I think it sets up many of the topics that we will grapple with throughout the course. And I posted a short reading by Nagel and also a video on a mind-body problem by a well-known philosopher and who has studied the problem extensively, and these are done well. This is in the Canopy School Library. I highly recommend it. So have a look through it. If you haven't, have a look through it. Not right now, of course, but when we are done or whenever you find time. I think these episodes, the episodes that are recorded are quite good. Now, what I want you to do, if you haven't read, I want you to read, it's about 10 pages, it's not long. The mind-body problem in this, in the book by Nagel, and you have a PDF of it here. Okay, so this is just an introduction to the main philosophical and scientific questions from the perspective of a philosopher. The mind-body problem is in chapter 4, and of course you're welcome to read the rest if you like. It's a short, well-written introductory book to main philosophical problems that are unsolved, basically, or we still grapple with, we are still working out. And we will probably for quite a long time. So read the mind-body problem. It's about 10 pages, as I said, and it's written in a pretty accessible language. So I'm just going to go to the chat for a second. Okay, so that is basically your homework for this week, and then there's more coming up next week. So we're not wasting any time here. The way I set up the course, so you'll see all these modules. So for example, for happiness, we will start with happiness after I give a short introduction today of the mind-body problem. And the articles are posted here. And I also set up discussion boards. So the discussion boards, what I want you to do for each week and as early as possible in the week, so that other students can engage and respond to your posts. So after you read the article, and this is hopefully over the weekend, so that by Monday you are ready to make a posting, or over the weekend. So I want you to post a short reflection and a question for other students to engage. So you must post one reflection, one question, and 2 responses to your fellow students. So after you read the article on happiness, I want you to basically engage in a short reflection on anything that's in the article, okay? So about a paragraph or so, nothing overly extensive, but not too short either. So I have an idea of what's, that you have read the article and that you have thought about whatever it is that has caught your interest in the article. And then I want you to, once we post your reflection, then I want you to post a question right underneath your reflection that's somehow related to your reflection. And then I want you to read posts by your fellow students, and I want you to reflect, and I want you to respond to their postings, okay? Because everyone will post a reflection and a question, and this way other students will be able to respond to your question, and you will be able to respond to other students' questions. So you are required to post 2 replies to 2 other students, okay? And this is going to be worth 2.5 marks or 2.5%, and we will do about 10 of these. So there's a discussion board that's set up for each week. So that's basically the plan. You read the literature by the weekend, and then on Monday, I want you, or on the weekend, I want you to start posting, because then we will need the entire week for you to engage in the posts of your fellow students. So that will be 25% of your grade right there. We will do 1 each week, except the midterms and the final test.
That sounds really fun.
Okay, I'm glad. Any other questions in terms of the discussion boards? No?
So we have until Monday to post, I guess, or do we have until?
Well, they already, so for happiness and love, I've already opened the discussion boards.
Okay.
And you can get on these as soon as possible. Sooner the better.
Right.
So they're open already, but they have due dates.
Okay.
But they're going to be open immediately when I open them. So I opened already 2, and then later on today I will open many more. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So it's just week 1 and 2 that you've opened.
Yeah, and I'm going to open the rest this week and next week. So I'll be ahead of you.
Okay, so finish pretty much weeks 1 and 2 by Monday.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
This way you'll be on top of the schedule. Yeah. Now the midterm and the final will be composed of multiple choice questions and 1 or 2 short essay questions, and I will speak to that more when we get there, but that's basically the setup. So in terms of the midterm, I will ask you a whole bunch of multiple choice questions, and then I will ask you maybe 1 essay question that will generally address something that runs, a theme that runs through all these articles, or maybe I'll give you a choice to choose from. But I will let you know, and I'll keep you posted about that. When you go to the midterm, I think there's already, there are midterm questions posted here, but that will give you an indication what kind of questions to expect. I will most likely tweak some of these, so don't take them, they are not written in stone at the moment. I will change them, but nevertheless have a look through them to give you an idea of what I will be expecting, okay? So that's basically it. There was going to be also an essay, research essay instructions. I think I have posted here topics as well. Yes, there are topics. Have a look through this. This will give you an idea of the kind of questions you will get. Again, some of these I might change, some of these I might tweak, but that's basically, there is information here for you to go through, and it gives you a very specific sense of the questions that you will have a chance to answer, or the research projects questions to engage. Now, before you submit your essay, you will be required to submit a proposal, like a one-page proposal, basically, you know. And on the proposal, I will ask you to include basically which topic you're doing, what is your thesis, what is your position, and how you will argue it, maybe a short plan, and what literature you will use to defend your thesis and write your essay. So about a page, you know, just to give me a rough idea, but at the same time as specific as possible before you submit the essay, so that I can give you a bit of feedback. So I can tell you, yes, this looks good, proceed, or this looks like a, you know, overly general or ambitious topic project. I don't think you're going to finish it. You might, you know, you might need 2 or 3 years to finish it, and that's basically not what I want you to do, because you know, you're not writing a master's thesis or a PhD here, but just something shorter. So it has to be quite concrete, and it has to revolve around an argument. And many of these topics revolve around you adjudicating or arguing a position within the literature. So that's quite doable for a short essay. It's just that I need to see what you have done so far. And this way it will give you a way of organizing your work, prepping, and also a way for me to give you some feedback on your work, so that your essays are better, basically. Any questions about that?
Nope, it all makes sense.
Okay. So again, have a look through that.
Actually, just one question.
Sure.
When would you be starting to do this essay?
Say again?
When would we be starting this essay? Like week 3 or 4?
The essay will be due, I think, week 10.
Okay.
And I will I will create a specific date for you, and then so that I have enough time to mark it and you get your grade back and my feedback before the end of the semester. And I think I will make the proposal due either week 7 or week 8. So 2 or 3 weeks before you submit your essay. And of course, the earlier the better. But for me, so that I can get back to you.
So, so the essay is based off the proposal?
Yes, the essay will be based on your proposal, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions in reference to the research essay?
Is this our only culminating assignment?
Apart from the midterm and the final?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So for this essay, do we write it based on the literature that you provided, or can we use some other works as well?
Yes. Lisa, yes?
Yes.
So yes, you can, of course, use the literature that is provided and that we will go over. And of course, when you go through the questions, you will see that they're all based on the topics that we cover and will cover in the class. And then you are asked to do a bit of additional research. So I would say minimum 5 to 6 articles, including the ones that we will use in the class. So let's say you might use 2 articles or 1 article on a specific topic of your choice that we will have already studied, and then you can do additional research on that article or on the topic of that article. So maybe 3 or 4 additional articles that you will have to go through.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can start thinking about this as soon as possible. You can start thinking about these topics and your ideas this week and next week. And of course, the sooner you start thinking and putting together a proposal, the sooner you can start writing and doing your research. And you know, I think this way your work will be much better. You can, apart from these topics, you can come up with your own topic, but it has to be basically, you have to get a green light from me, because I have to see whether the topic, your project, whether it's doable or whether it's not doable in a relatively short period of time. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So that's basically how the course is set up. Let me go over the. So here's a short lecture note I've posted based on the reading by the work by Thomas Nagel, and Thomas Nagel is still alive. He's in New York, and hopefully he's doing well. But he's a well-known philosopher of mind, and he's been writing since the 70s. And I like his short essay because it nicely sets up many of the problems that exist in psychological sciences. So here we're grappling with the mind-body problem. Is a philosophical problem and a psychological problem. Now, do any of you, when I say a philosophical problem and a psychological problem, or a philosophical problem versus a scientific problem, do you understand the difference?
I want to say yes, but I'm afraid you're going to ask me to explain.
Yes, everything must be explained. So go ahead.
Okay, so philosophy is more like a way of life versus the psychology of how our brain and function of what we believe in works. So the psychology is the brain's mind, like the function, the data that we have, whereas the philosophy is like more of theoretical concepts. For example, we believe in a god or a higher being or power, and like a soul or spirit, and those concepts are intangible, but we believe in them.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, so people have belief states, right? And belief states are, of course, different from, or belief claims. And belief claims are definitely different from knowledge claims, right? Because as you said, you know, people can believe certain things, but they can be intangible. They're, you know, they might not even have arguments to prove them right or wrong. They might not have even evidence to support their positions. And this happens on a regular basis, right? So philosophy is in many ways a discipline to teach us how to navigate through knowledge claims, whether they are scientific claims, cultural claims, you know, how to think critically about the way people speak and think and construct arguments, right? So that's definitely in the domain of philosophy. Philosophy is also quite abstract and deals with simple or quite complex concepts. And you're also right on that point. Yeah, that's good. And I will say a couple of other things, but I maybe want to see if someone else wants to engage.
I thought that like psychology is more about behavior and how people interact with others, where their philosophy is, finding answers for the big questions.
Good. What are the big questions?
The understanding of reality and why are we all here? What are we doing? What's going to happen after we die? And all of those questions.
Yes, you're right. Those are big and old philosophical questions, and there's a lot has been written about that. There's some good stuff out there for you to read, definitely. You're right. So the psychology deals with human behavior. That's true, but not only, right? It wants to also predict human behavior, right? Remember,
Yeah, like how thought processes and is what's the word I'm looking for? How thought processes in the human mind and is
you mean how thought processes and
converted into action. Yeah. And I still feel like philosophy can be behavior though, like in Buddhism, when the mind has to reach enlightenment, and it is a practice of behavior to reach that point.
That's true. Yes, so there's philosophy is really can be used for many different aspects of life, for behaving, for having a perspective or a view on life, or engaging in arguments with others. Political science is a branch of philosophy. So really, all the sciences stem from philosophy, because before we didn't have, when philosophical thinking was taking off, we didn't have the distinction into different disciplines. There wasn't really a distinction between the typical scientific disciplines that we have today, right? Chemistry, physics, biology, disciplines that are related to computers, right? IT, and so on and so forth. These are all very new developments. So the philosophical questions have always preceded sciences. And once we have, so a typical philosophical question is, as you said, I think it was Lisa who said, what is reality? Is reality composed of physical properties, or is reality composed of physical properties and non-physical properties, right? So that is the most basic question. And if reality is composed of physical properties, what are they? And now you get into the sub-disciplines, right? Specific disciplines of our reality. So which is chemistry, physics, psychology, sociology, right? Because we have different aspects of different features of reality, and different disciplines will basically zoom in, hone in on specific features of our reality, right? So that's why we have different disciplines. And the mind-body problem really is in the middle of it, because we want to know how the mind relates to the body, right? And here I put also brain, because the brain is a physical property, right? But we also use the language of mind. So we want to know what is the relationship between the two. And that is a philosophical problem. That is what we call a metaphysical problem, because we want to see how one type of entity or one type of substance in reality relates to another type of entity or another type of substance. What is the relationship, right? So that is basically that is what makes it a philosophical problem. But it also, in virtue of that, becomes a serious scientific problem, because now scientists, neuroscientists and neuropsychologists can start developing tools such as PET scans, fMRIs, single cell recordings, and whatnot, that are used in medicine in order to get into the brain and find out what's happening. And then we can correlate, we can say, well, something is happening in the brain and there are specific symptoms, psychological symptoms or mental symptoms that are correlated to what's happening in the brain. And that is definitely part of neuropsychology, especially on the pathological side, where people suffer specific brain injuries or strokes or aneurysms, and that gives rise to specific psychological impairments, right? So that is basically studying the relationship of the mind to the body or the brain. So we have two problems here, right? One is a philosophical problem, stating the relationship between mind and body as two properties in the universe, or two features of the universe, and then trying to spell out in more experimental terms or in more scientific terms or operational terms what that relationship is. What is it about the brain that gives rise to the mind? Or how does the mind causally affect the brain? Maybe everything is the brain and there's no mind whatsoever. Maybe everything reduces to the brain. So those are the questions that stem from the mind-body problem.
Cool.
All right. So here my question was, initially I wanted you to kind of think about this for a second. What do you think is the relationship between the mind or consciousness and the body or brain? And here I think of a good example or draw something simple to illustrate how you understand the relationship. Now, of course, we don't have to extensively tackle this problem, but I wanted to tease you a little bit. I wanted to pick your brains a little bit to, even before reading the literature, I'm sure some of you have thought about this to some extent at some point in your life, and maybe we can entertain the question right now for a little bit. So any cracks at the relationship?
Good morning, sir. I actually just thought of not a metaphor, maybe, yeah, but since I'm an IT student, so I'm just going to use IT metaphors to try to try to be teased by you, okay? Sure. So I see the brain as the hardware, and I see the consciousness as the software.
Okay, all right. So why would, yeah, the brain is definitely the hardware, right? We have specific structures and specific mechanisms, right? But what could be a good example of the software?
So let's say that when you're writing a program, there should be like a main function, right? So the main function is the thing that drives how the hardware can work in a way, basically. So.
Okay, so in relation to our everyday life, what could be a good example of the software that represents the mind?
Like you need to eat. There's a function called eat breakfast at 7, and then when the time hits 7, you need to eat breakfast, something like that.
Okay. All right, but what if someone says, well, my body tells me to eat, I get hungry?
That's true too. I mean, I'm not really sure which drives which, probably the body that drives the mind. Yeah, if you put it in this way, but sometimes we can just want to eat something. Then our body will tell us, yes, that you want to eat something, right? So maybe it's your mind that is tricking you to eat more than you need, but probably your body is just craving for something, yeah.
No, I know that very well, because sometimes I get up like 3 o'clock in the morning and eat ice cream, right?
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, I do, yeah, and it breaks up my
Good that I don't keep ice cream at home. Good that I don't keep that. Otherwise, I'll be doing the same.
Yeah, that's but I'll have some cake. I'll just look for something sweet. So I think so the body definitely craves specific nutrients or specific properties, nutritional properties, but we get into a habit, right? So my brain will wake me up and tell me, you know, quote unquote, tell me, Luke, go to the kitchen, open the fridge, tell me what's there, you know, or eat something sweet, right? So so habits, right? But all of this can be reduced to the body, right? We're still missing the mind. So now you're slowly seeing the problem here, the problem between the mind and the body.
But I think, sorry, I would say like the consciousness in that sense would be like when you decide to tell your body that no, we're not going to do this, you know, your conscious mind that is making that discernment, whether, okay, yeah, like my body's hungry, but I'm not gonna listen to it, because you have that conscious mind to make the decision that, okay, I'm not going to have ice cream at 3 o'clock in the morning because it's going to ruin my sleep. And you make that decision, you know, to ignore your body, although you might be starving. Like some people have sleep for dinner a lot of the time. So, and that's like, as much as, you know, you're getting a physical response, you're not giving into it.
You're right. So here, the mind or consciousness, and sometimes these concepts are used interchangeably, will be the reflection, right? Where you engage and where you're aware of the fact, okay, I know what's happening. My body wants me to go to the kitchen and have some cheesecake or ice cream, right? And those are definitely two of my weaknesses. But I will consciously stop myself from doing so, right? So then you have this conscious reflection, and that definitely is part of your consciousness or your mind, and you can act on it. You can choose to follow it, or you can choose not to follow it, right? So I think this is a good example of how the mind fits into the problem, right? But it doesn't explain how the mind is part of the brain, right? If we want to use the analogy of software versus hardware, right?
Then software cannot function without the hardware. So that's the hardware doesn't function without the software. They're kind of, you know, interrelated.
Yeah, that's true. And this analogy, hardware versus software, consciousness versus brain, has been used before. And John Searle, if you want to look that up, and if you want to pursue this analogy and this problem, has written about this extensively, and he has an argument against it. He doesn't think that the mind is the software, and he doesn't mean that the brain is the hardware, and he has specific examples and arguments to try to convince you that that's not the case. So I suggest you have a look at that when you have some time, or I can find it for you and forward it to you. But the name is John
Thank
Searle.
you, sir.
What's that?
Do you mind typing it out in the chat? I'm not really sure I will spell it correctly. Thank you.
John Searle. And I think you can just look up the software hardware analogy, and it will come up, or any combination of, as long as you use software, hardware, brain, consciousness words, it will definitely come up. Yeah. But I will look it up as well, and if I find it, then I'll send you a link.
Hi, sir.
Hello.
So can I try to take a crack at this?
Sure.
So what I want to say is the mind, like for example, if you feel something like an emotion, like for example, you're sad, you just feel
I'm not
sad,
sad.
but no, I'm just giving an example. For example, if I feel sad, I'm aware that I'm sad, and then my brain analyzes or processes the fact that I'm sad, and then what is the reason behind that emotion. Like at least for me, if I'm upset, my brain overanalyzes every little thing, like why are we feeling this way, what just happened, what is the problem. I don't know, I'm not sure if that's the case with everyone, but at least for me, I overanalyze why I'm feeling that emotion. So I feel like the mind just feels that emotion, and you're aware, it makes you aware that you're feeling an emotion like pain, and then your brain analyzes what caused that emotion to occur.
Yes, that's true. So the analysis of trying to figure out causes or relationships is the consciousness part or the mind part? Is that what you're trying to say?
Oh, I'm trying to say that that's the brain. The brain analyzes why you're feeling that emotion, and the mind just feels it. Like the mind makes it aware that you're feeling an emotion, so you're conscious that you're feeling an emotion, and your brain analyzes why you're feeling it. I think, I'm not sure.
So can I ask people to mute their microphones? Thank you. And unmute when you're ready to speak and make a comment. Okay, thanks. Yeah, the brain definitely is equipped to feel emotions. The body is equipped to feel emotions, and the brain is also equipped to represent. In psychological sciences or in neurology, we say the brain has representational maps, and somehow those representational maps also become conscious. You're conscious of them, right? And that's when you can engage in reflective states. You can you engage in exactly what you've said. You know, why is this happening? Why am I feeling like this? What could be the cause of it? Will I feel the same way tomorrow, etc., etc.? And you start analyzing yourself. Yes, this is something that we engage in on a regular basis. I do it, you do it, and many other people do it. Yeah. So yeah, the brain is definitely composed. It has specific brain parts, especially the brainstem and the limbic system, for representing and initiating or giving an output for specific emotions. Yeah, that is true.
Sir, so then I have a question then.
Sure.
Who is in charge? Is it your consciousness or your mind? Because at the same time, it's like, you know, for example, if you're addicted to smoking or something like that, and when you choose that you want to quit, you make the decision. Did you make the decision, or did your mind make that decision?
Well, if you identify with your mind, then you make the decision, right?
Like how so?
So when someone smokes or when someone has an addiction, we all have addictions. You know, some people smoke, some people eat ice cream. I eat ice cream. I have my addiction. I love to play tennis, but I can't play right now, so I'm suffering. You know, because I can't engage in my addiction. So we all have addictions. They are of different types, and some of them are good for us, and some of them are definitely bad for us. Now, the body will definitely get used to a substance, whether it's nicotine or drugs or alcohol or gambling or ice cream or driving fast down the highway. Okay, all of that is going to, all of that gives rise to specific habits. Okay, and so the body calls for it. So people who are addicted to nicotine is designed specifically to create a habit, right? To create an addiction. So you buy more cigarettes, and the companies that produce them are basically wealthy. That's how it works in our world. And it's the same thing with alcohol, right? The body very quickly gets used to a substance, and then it's asking for more of it. The same way it's asking for food. So really, in this case, the body is in charge. The mind can either go along with it, or the mind can say, no, there's no way I'm going to do this anymore. And then it becomes a struggle to counteract the body. Okay. And because there's such an intimate relationship between the mind and the body, right? Both of these, you can say, struggle with it at the same time. But your mind will definitely give you the capacity to reflect on your decisions. And then you can willfully decide, no, I'm going to stop, right? I can willfully say, as the example earlier, I think from Liz or someone else was, or Aisha, was it? I'm probably mispronouncing your names. I don't remember them all by now, but you can reflect and say, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to exercise my will to stop myself from eating ice cream at 4 o'clock in the morning, or to stop myself from smoking, right? And that is definitely the capacity, the cognitive capacity that we have to say no to the body, okay? And depending on the strength of will, you will reach specific results, right? So Who is in charge? Both or either or. Sometimes the body, yeah.
Are we talking about a 60-40 split here?
Oh, I don't know.
60 is like the mind, I guess, and then 40 is the body.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that would be difficult to test. How would you empirically show there's a 60-40 split, right? We would have to conduct some sort of experiments to prove that, right?
Right.
Yeah. But I'd say, in terms of, let's say, my eating ice cream habits, I have to fight the body. So the body, I would say the body is, 70-30 or 60-40.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the body's winning. In terms of the body. Okay.
Yeah, the brain and the body are winning.
The mind does take over. So you can
but
never
the thing
have a
is,
definite split.
Yeah. Sorry, but go ahead, Hamza.
Oh, okay. So, I'm just saying, sometimes the mind takes over the body, and you never have a definite split. Like, for example, your ice cream habit. Say for like one time you decide, hey, I don't want ice cream, but then you still get out of bed and get ice cream. Then it's the mind that took over.
Is it? Or is the mind just reacting to the body because the body is overpowering it?
Well, I just want to say that your body doesn't know that it's ice cream. It's your mind that knows that it's an ice cream. So
maybe. Sure, yeah, but my body is craving something very specific, right? My mind knows where it is. It's in the kitchen, it's in the freezer, and it's called ice cream, chocolate ice cream, right? And there I am, a few seconds later in the kitchen. So, but it's the body that wakes me up, right? It's the mind is not waking me up consciously, right? The body is asking for it, and then somehow, right, due to the physical processes that are taking place in my body and in my brain, give rise to me waking up and then realizing, okay, I really crave that ice cream and I go for it. The same way a smoker reaches for a cigarette or a drinker reaches for a drink.
I don't know if that's necessarily true, because like sometimes your body will produce a physical, like response or need, and you are your consciousness is the one that's like, okay, you're associating that physical response with that need, because there's a lot of times when people will feel hungry and they're actually just thirsty, like they just want some water, right? So like you might be the one who would be like, okay, well, I'm gonna eat and eat and eat, but really you're just dehydrated, like your body is begging for some water and you just keep giving it chips. So your body's gonna keep it'll satisfy you for now, but
that's true. But I mean, we can to some extent, you're right. But here's a simple counter example, right? Our bodies can pretty easily distinguish between thirst and hunger, right?
You would think so, but a lot of people can't.
Really?
A lot of people, yeah, because the thing is that you can actually look into it. Like a lot of the time, like your body will create this like hunger response, but you're really just dehydrated. Like it's proven,
Okay, so why do we use different words such as hunger and thirst?
Wow, now we're off. That I can't.
So if we have a word for thirst, that means we can clearly identify the need to satiate thirst with water, as opposed to, I feel like some cheese, right? Now, of course, hunger doesn't really dissociate between different types of foods, right? But I think still it's a little bit more accurate, because we have cravings for specific types of food, right? Sure, it's generally expressed as hunger, right? But once I open up the door to my fridge, right, then okay, there is some cheese, there is salami, there is this, there is that, right? And I'm off to the races, right? I'm already, I'm gone. I'm definitely making myself a few sandwiches, right? Or indulging into whatever, tickles my fancy. So
wouldn't you say, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
But wouldn't you say that that's more of a consciousness thing where, because if I've never tried pizza pockets, I'm not gonna crave pizza pockets. Like my mind is creating that pleasure response to pizza pockets. So wouldn't you say that's like, I'm just thinking that I am craving this thing, as opposed to my body being like, I need it? Like your body's just hungry and maybe want something to eat.
But Aaliyah, you know what cheese tastes like. you
Exactly.
know what what tomato paste tastes like.
Sure.
And I really like your example of like food and hunger and craving and understanding it, because it like reminds me of people getting mad, right? And they have arguments, and it's like, why am I getting mad at this person and why am I fighting and arguing? But for them, they don't realize the root of their emotion is shame, and they don't acknowledge like, oh, I'm getting mad at this person because they hit a spot that I'm sensitive about, and I feel shame from myself, and that's why I'm getting mad at this person. It's not, and I feel like and that's like a example to a Z problem will help us in our life.
Oh, I think someone's dog is hungry. Well, all of this talk about food and the brain and the mind is definitely making me hungry, but I will use the power of my will and consciousness to go to the next slide. So yeah, I'm really happy that you guys are taking up the examples and commenting. That's really good. That means you will enjoy the rest of the topics coming up. Let me go to the next slide. I just want to go through these. So Nagel says, you know, when you eat chocolate ice cream, I mean, he doesn't say chocolate ice cream. I use chocolate ice cream because I like chocolate ice cream. What happens in your consciousness, right? Now, the answer to this question is relatively simple, right? You have a sensation. I have a sensation of chocolate ice cream in my mouth, right? And I can describe that sensation, you know, pretty accurately or pretty vividly to you, or you can describe it to me. Now, when you eat chocolate ice cream, what happens in your brain?
It triggers stimulus.
I would say it would be more of like a sense of relief because your brain is going, hey, I need something. And when you eat that ice cream, it's like, hey, I don't need that something.
Dopamine gets released.
I think
Yes.
it's endorphins.
So yeah, so specific neurotransmitters will be released, right? Specific brain mechanisms will be activated, right? And not only in the brain or in the central nervous system, but throughout the body, right? Your digestive system will start working in your liver and your bladder and pancreas and so on and so forth, right? So the whole machinery is excited and up and running. But Nagel says, you know, what's happening exactly in the brain? You know, how do we take the sensation and we map it onto the brain, right? He's trying to, so he's creating, he's setting up the problem, the mind-body problem, by trying to create a correlation between the two, the mind and the body. Here, the taste of chocolate and what is happening in the brain. You know, what is actually the equivalent of the taste of chocolate in the brain, right?
I got a question, actually.
Sure.
When it comes to chocolate ice cream, what if you ate the ice cream blindfolded?
Yes.
Would you still know it?
Oh yeah, I would definitely know it's chocolate ice cream.
Okay.
If you cover my nose, I might have a hard problem figuring out the exact taste, because the sensation of smelling and the sensation of taste are interconnected, are interwoven.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in the literature, yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna go to the chat. Some of these are funny. People are getting hungry. Okay. All right. So let's move on. So the other question is, well, if I open up your brain, will I see or feel the taste of chocolate ice cream you are experiencing, right? And I'm just following the argument here by Thomas Nagel, because Thomas Nagel is a dualist. He thinks that the mind is very closely related to the brain, but it's a different feature, or it's a different entity than the brain itself. So if I were to, you know, open up your brain, or if someone were to open up your brain and you consented to this, would they find the taste of chocolate ice cream in your brain? Or would they find a whole bunch of neurons and neurotransmitters, you know, a whole bunch of chemical properties and biological properties, but no taste?
I
I don't
don't
think.
think. Ooh, sorry.
Say again?
Sorry about that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Who was first?
Can you hear me? Is this me?
Yes. Aliyah, yes?
Yes. I would say no, because would find is like just a pleasurable experience. Like you would find like the chemical, you know, neural pathways of like maybe dopamine or something of, you know, being produced. But, you know, it could be you could get the same experience as someone eating cauliflower, and like it might look the same like to someone else just because they really enjoy cauliflower, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Wow, you really destroyed my chocolate ice cream fantasy. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but then, okay, well then what's the correlation of cauliflower to specific brain features or properties?
I just think it's like more so the pleasure response, you know, like you like your enjoyment of that thing, because some people might like say like mint chocolate chip ice cream. I find it disgusting. Somebody else loves it, you know. But if we eat it, we're not going to get the same response, even though it's still ice cream, you know, like the flavoring, your palate, your you know, experience with it is
right. But you good, but then you see you use the word experience. How is that experience mapped onto the brain?
Through like, I would say like neural pathways, like, you know, different chemical responses in your head to the flavorings, because it goes onto your tongue, you taste it, like it or not, and then
but then see, all of a sudden what you're doing is you're using the words, the language of, you know, processes, functions, mechanisms. Where is the experience?
The experience is on the tongue, the receptors, and everybody has different receptors because the human bodies are not all the same.
Okay, sure. More or less.
Your experience is that you've been through this already.
That's also true. But where's the experience in the brain or the receptors? The receptors are we're using the language of physical language to, when I say receptor, right, I have no experience of a sensation. The sensation, the experience is gone. Now, all of a sudden, I'm focusing on something physical.
Because the physical, it's the first step for you to establish an experience in your brain.
Okay. And if I, so the body has to, it's a necessary condition?
You need to know something for, like, you need to experience it for the first time, then you will know what it is. If you don't experience it, you won't know what it is. I mean, like sensation wise. For example, for me, it is not cold to go outside today, like -4. But for my husband, it's very cold for him, and he needs a very thick jacket. So the sensation is just different. Maybe he has more sensitive receptor to coldness than me. That's why I don't feel the cold. But from a physical perspective, from a physics perspective, -4, it's -4. It should be the same no matter what I feel, right? So
it's objective, right? -4 is minus.
Yeah, it's subject. Yeah.
Speed of light is speed of light. Yes. Yeah.
But for me, subjectively, I don't find it cold. But for my husband, it's really cold for him. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. And we all have different, in psychology, we say different thresholds, right?
Threshold, yes, thresholds.
Yeah,
yep.
different thresholds for sensations, right? And different thresholds for experiencing pain or pleasure, right? For your husband, it's painful. For you, well, it's not, right? Good. Yeah, that's true. But Nagel, what Nagel is doing is he's trying to get the reader and get the thinker who's thinking like you right now about this problem to tell him what is it about the brain, where is the sensation or the experience in the central nervous system. Because once you start looking into the brain, all you find is, chemical properties and biological properties and bodily properties. We all of a sudden, when you use that language, you lose the language of sensation, experience, and
I see. So that's the consciousness, right? You can find the consciousness objectively.
That's
you cannot you cannot objectify. Sorry, I don't know how to make it like
you use the word objectify, yes, yeah.
Yeah, you cannot objectify consciousness. It's vague, and you can see it, you can touch it, but you can only experience it. Something like that.
Close. You can definitely feel and touch it by being the owner of consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go outside and you say, well, it's not that cold, you're immediately telling, the interlocutor or the person that you're talking to or to yourself that I'm fine, I'm good, I like this weather, it's not bothering me, right? So you're very quickly reacting to a sensation that you have, right? Nagel what Nagel wants and is pushing the scientists and the whole community, scientific community or the philosophical community, to give him a correlate, an exact correlate of what is happening in the brain or in the body when there are specific sensations in consciousness, right? And
is there a definite answer yet? Sorry
No,
to interrupt. Is there? Okay, cool. Good that I'm aware of that.
yeah. There isn't. That's why we're working on these problems, right? From philosophically and scientifically, right? So that's what creates the mind-body problem, right? We're going to take a break in a minute because I need a washroom break. But the mind-body problem is basically trying to figure out what is the relationship between what we call consciousness or the mind with what is happening in the brain or the body. Okay, we're trying to put the two together or on top of each other, so we have basically a theory that would relate one property or one substance or one entity to the other, and we could deduce by looking at the brain what's happening in consciousness and what's happening in consciousness at the same time happening in the brain, right? And in the middle of it is the mind-body problem. So that's why Nagel is setting up this problem. He's not using the language of ice cream. I'm using the language of ice cream. He's using the language of something else, I think, in the chapter. But it doesn't really matter what example you use as long as you follow his argument. Let's take a 5-minute break. Is that all right?
Sounds good to me.
Good. Yes. So we can get some ice cream on our own.
Yeah, I wish. But you can do that. Be my guest. Okay, so I'll see you in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Start recording again. Any questions so far? I mean, you have had lots of questions, but after the break, and where we need to pick up.
Just one question, sir.
Yes.
How was the ice cream?
I didn't have any ice cream, unfortunately. So here's the article, but I wish I did. Actually, I don't have any more ice cream in my fridge because I've decided to take control of my problem. So I am on that route to control. We'll see how it goes. I'll let you know how successful I am. So I'm just trying to find where the lecture note is. 1 second, let me just. The lecture note, oh, okay, disappeared on me for a second. Okay. So again, if I open up your brain, will I see the taste of chocolate ice cream in your you are experiencing? And that's very difficult to do, as you can see, because Thomas Nagel forces the scientific community or the philosophical community to come up with a pretty good theory of how how mental states relate to brain states. And if you put someone into a brain scan, let's say fMRI machine, you know, the images on the fMRI machine or the readings that the fMRI machine produces are not going to tell you and are not going to show you the taste of ice cream. Okay, so there's some sort of a disconnect. There's a gap basically in our knowledge in terms of relating conscious states or states of consciousness, which includes everything that you are aware of or conscious. This includes, you know, sensual experiences, all the different sensual experiences, cognitive experiences, everything basically that takes place in your mind that you are conscious of, or in your consciousness that you are conscious of. And then giving it a physical language, giving it a correlate, a very distinct and accurate correlate of the language of consciousness in the brain. Okay, that's what he's looking for. So then he says, if I can't find the taste of chocolate ice cream in your brain, where is it then? You know, it is in your consciousness. You can essentially refer to it. You can use descriptive adjectives to describe it to me, but how does it exactly relate to the brain? How does it exactly relate to the mechanisms that are, you know, unfolding or taking place in your brain? Okay? So where is it? You know, if it's not in the brain, but it's in consciousness, then perhaps consciousness and the brain, or consciousness or mental life and the brain, are different entities. They are interconnected intimately, but they are different in kind. Okay, and that's what makes it a philosophical problem. And this is called either substance dualism or dual aspect theory. So substance dualism goes back to René Descartes, and you might remember René Descartes from mathematics, the Cartesian coordinates. This dates back to you know, 15th and 16th century Europe. But René Descartes, apart from being you know, a pretty good mathematician, was actually a pretty good philosopher. And if you're ever interested, you can read his meditations on philosophy. They're pretty good, and they are still with us, and they're still quite important. And René Descartes says there are two properties in the universe. There are properties that are physical, extended in space. They can be measured using the language of science and mathematics. And there are also mind entities, or what he calls, you know, the mind or the thinking substance, or spiritual entities that are not like physical entities. And he doesn't use the language of entities, but he uses the language of substance. So we have physical substances and we have mental substances, and they're different. They somehow interact when it comes to the human body or the human condition, because human beings clearly are mental creatures and bodily creatures at the same time, right? Our lives comprise some sort of a functional unity between the two, mental properties and physical properties, right? But he thinks that mental properties are different from physical properties because they cannot be measured and studied in the same way as physical properties can be. Okay, memory does not feel the same way as a physical entity, right? Memory is not the same property as a computer screen or a mouse or a cup or the taste of chocolate in my mouth, right, or in your mouth. So it just, it doesn't extend in space in the same way. It cannot be measured in the same way. It cannot be weighed. It cannot be it cannot be scrutinized in the same way we scrutinize physical objects. So that's why René Descartes thought that there's, in the universe, fundamentally, there are two properties, two categories. One that is composed of the various types of physical properties or entities, and the other one that's composed of minds. And we need a language to put the two together or to explain how the two interact with one universe. So that's substance dualism in a nutshell. That goes back to René Descartes. Any questions there?
No.
Okay.
Oh, actually, yeah, I do. You mentioned earlier about memory.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like the mind and the consciousness. So, say if someone has amnesia and they forget all the stuff, like, but they remember how to write and then they remember how to like drive, and then they just subconsciously walk to their house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does that integrate in our brain? Like, how do these secondhand nature things like happen?
Well, the brain operates at a conscious level and unconscious level, and you have to remember, I'm not going to give you the long-winded answer because that would probably take a week, but I'm going to give you the short version answer. And the brain operates on specific, you could say, quote unquote, programs. It has been programmed by nature, by evolution, by natural selection over millions and millions of years to engage in simple algorithms, right? Getting up if I get up in the morning and go fetch some water, that is, you can say my body is basically unfolding or acting according to a very simple algorithm that gives specific steps for my behavior, right? And the brain structures and mechanisms have been designed to do that, to execute such behaviors on a regular basis. And a lot of them are unconscious. I don't have to willfully, consciously make myself walk. I just engage in walking and my body does the rest. There are specific brain mechanisms that are called central pattern generators, where the nervous neuronal signal repeats itself on a loop, in a loop-like fashion, in a recursive fashion, and it gives rise to walking. I don't have to think to myself, okay, now I'm going to put my left foot out and then I'm going to put my right foot out. You just walk. And it's the same thing with breathing, and it's the same thing with coding memories. Now, if memories are coded in a brain part that has been damaged by stroke or a car accident, then of course, subjects will suffer from amnesia, a specific type of amnesia. So we know that there's a really close relationship between cognition or mental states or consciousness and brain parts, because we know that specific brain parts will give rise to specific symptoms, right? So that is the relationship between the mind and the brain, but we still don't know what is it about the brain that gives rise to the mind. We know that there's a close relationship, but we don't know exactly the causal relationship. So so memories are coded unconsciously and then they pop into your mind consciously. And there are many different mechanisms and procedures, procedural behaviors that are encoded in your brain, and they just run. And sometimes we can stop them, and sometimes we can't stop them. But a lot of it is unconscious, basically. So that is kind of my quick, short answer to your question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I enjoyed that very much. Thank you.
All right, that'll be $100.
I'm already paying for this course.
Oh, that's true. Okay, never mind. Okay, so any questions about substance dualism? Because this will come up a little bit later on as well, this concept.
No.
Okay, anyone else? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So how would you define dualism in one sentence?
Yeah, the theory of dualism. Now we have to be careful. There are two types of dualisms. One is substance dualism, where that goes back to Descartes, which basically says the universe is composed of two different substances, fundamentally. Mind stuff or mind substances and physical substances. That's dualism. That's substance dualism.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Could you say, sorry, could you say that one habit is the steps that you're taking? And I think someone mentioned that it's muscle memory, and what do I say? There's habits and muscle memory, and then on top of that, if someone does get amnesia, then it's like you're learning different things, right? Like you've already learned and programmed it to be muscle memory or a habit, right? And then anything else that you don't know yet is going through the trial and tribulations of learning or processing, correct? So like if you have amnesia and you can walk to your house, it's already a habit, it's already muscle memory, it's already there. It's like stored there. It's
do I know where I'm going?
You still make it to your house even though you got amnesia, right?
I don't know. I mean, depends. We have to talk about specific types of amnesia here, right? If I'm going somewhere and I don't know where I'm going, then sure, the body is moving, but where is the body? Where is it going?
It's
right?
still, yeah, I agree.
Then it's a problem of of memory. Now, memory, we will look at memory, but remember, memory has an unconscious part and a conscious part, just like many other features of the mind. Okay.
Right.
So memory is coded unconsciously, right? You don't know exactly when you bring up a memory or when a memory pops into your consciousness, right? You don't know where it's coming from, right?
Right.
You just all you know is kind of the result of the whole process, right? So the brain, goes through specific processes. Those processes crystallize or form specific memories, and at some point, those memories pop into your consciousness, right? But you don't know exactly what's happening in your brain when you are in a state of memory, right? So that shows that that the mechanisms of memory are unconscious to you. All you are conscious is the result of those mechanisms.
Right. And because of the result, would you call it habit, either consciously or unconsciously? Because it's
Some
been
of them are
programmed.
habitual, yes.
Yeah.
So let's say you reaching for your cell phone becomes a habit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And now there's good habits and there's bad habits, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. All right, so let's move on. But how, so you can extend, now I'm basically going through the example here, so going through the argument that's laid out by Nagel, but how can we make sense of soul or mind apart from physical objects? It's not everything we experience or know about the universe made up of physical objects, matter or energy. That includes you and me, right? So if you believe that everything in the universe, this includes the mind and the brain and the body, is composed of physical properties, then from a philosophical perspective and also from a scientific perspective, we say that you are a materialist or a physicalist. Okay, so people who are materialists or physicalists, either they're scientists or philosophers or students like you, who engage in this kind of thinking, they would say, well, I think everything in the universe is made out of physical properties or physical processes. even though we cannot explain the mind in physical terms, even though we don't have a theory that would explain the mind in physical terms or only in brain terms, using the language of science and mathematics, right? You still believe that there is that the mind is physical, that it can, what do we say in science is that the mind reduces to physical properties, right? Even though it cannot be explicitly shown, because there are so many examples that there's a very close correlation between what happens in the mind and then what happens in the brain, okay? So even though it cannot be proven, there are still quite a few examples and the theory that everything in the universe is made out of physical properties or material properties, and the final theory is basically pending. We will get there. We're not there yet, but we are on our way. And people who think like that and argue like that think that dualism is unfounded. It's just the way we use language to try to understand how the universe works and how the body, and in that universe, how the mind relates to the body. But the mind-body problem will become solved, or the theory will be outdated, and it will be basically replaced by a more advanced theory of materialism or physicalism. Do you follow?
Yeah.
Okay. So some of you right now are either dualists or materialists, I'm sure, and that includes myself. I have my position on this as well. So if it's not, if we can't, so Nagel says if we cannot reduce the mind to physical mechanisms and physical explanations, then we have to opt out for some sort of dualism. And now we just have to spell out the relationship between mind stuff or mind things and physical things or physical stuff, okay? So Nagel is definitely a dualist, but many scientists and many philosophers are materialists, although the final theory on the relationship of the mind to the brain or the mind to the body is still pending. But nevertheless, they argue because they think that there are a lot of good examples out there. So to continue on in that line of argumentation, physical objects, substances, matter. So here, for example, we have, water is composed of specific atoms, right? Hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Diamonds, are composed of specific properties as well. You can say carbon and then pressure over time. So carbon can be a necessary condition and pressure over time can be a sufficient condition, right? And here, for instance, 2 hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. So 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom are separately necessary conditions for water, but the sufficient condition is when you put them together in a manner so that you have this relation, and that gives rise to water. But can we analyze or break down the taste of chocolate in your consciousness the way we can break down the physical properties of water and diamonds? That's Nagel's question. Is there something missing in this analysis? Right? Do you follow the argument?
I think like the perspective element is missing, like.
What do you mean?
Because, okay, so regardless of what you think of diamonds, it's going to take, carbon atoms with pressure over time to make diamonds, Yes. But like to break down the taste of chocolate in your consciousness, it's all subjective.
I'm listening. I'm just going to get a charger. Yeah.
Okay. It's all subjective. Like for someone who doesn't like chocolate, the taste of chocolate in your consciousness is going to have a negative negative breakdown in your mind, as opposed to someone who loves chocolate, it'll be positive. So I think it's things like taste are just highly subjective, and that's kind of missing there.
Yes, they're highly subjective, but why would that be a problem? We're still talking about, regardless whether someone likes a specific taste or they don't, right? How do you break down, is there a possibility of breaking down tastes if they are objectively true in reality, right? You know, when a dog eats something, it or he or she has specific reactions. They have sensual experiences. All human beings have sensual experiences. So that is an objective fact about, you could say, specific organisms, whether you're talking about birds, dogs, human beings, or even maybe more primitive organisms, right?
But I think like, because you know how like every person sees color differently, like whether it's like, you know, it's you know, it can be very small differences, but technically how you see red and how I see red are different. So like if you're
maybe
used
a little bit slightly, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so like if you're used to eating, you know, like spicy food your whole life, and then you taste like, you know, something sweet, and I'm not used to eating spicy food at all, like our taste buds are different. Like our taste buds have gotten accustomed to different things. So the taste itself, like generally speaking, you can try to break it down, but I think it's still like your whole life is built up to you having like such an individual experience with tasting chocolate.
Well, but in a way that's true. But look, I mean, when I say chocolate, you have specific association and I have a specific association, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we both know that we're talking about chocolate, right? We're not talking about vanilla.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So that is objectively true. Chocolate, as an objective entity in the world, right, will produce specific sensations in human beings with some variation, right? But because we use the language of chocolate and vanilla, and we know that vanilla is different from chocolate, we can objectively say that there is a difference, and our bodies can distinguish the difference, which gives rise to different sensations, right? Right. So now what Nagel wants to show here is that take that and try to break it down in physical language, the way we have broken down water, the properties of water, the properties of diamonds, using this language of sufficient, necessary and sufficient conditions. Right?
Oh, so it's like objective truth versus opinionated bias.
Yeah, let's just stick to the language of objective truth, right? If we can plot objective properties of chemical compounds on a periodic table, right? We can plot different things objectively using science. Then why can't we do that with the mind? We should be able to do that because the minds are also objective in the universe, right? You have a mind, I have a mind, right? We speak a language that can point that we have minds, right? That will give an indication that you are conscious and I'm conscious, and so on and so forth, right? So in order to show that materialism is true, you would have to, Nagel says, you would have to take consciousness or whatever appears in consciousness, take chocolate ice cream or a memory or whatever it may be, a visual experience of a dog, and then break it down into necessary and sufficient conditions of what is actually happening in the brain, so that I could say, you know what, when you taste chocolate, I know exactly what's happening in your brain. And when I look at your brain, I would be able to infer very quickly, yes, by looking at your brain right now, I know that you are for sure having chocolate.
So for the sake of debating, can I just say that because we haven't come up a unified way to define it or objectify it, that's why it's raising such a question.
Yes. That's right. Because if you're a physicalist or a materialist, at the end of the day, you believe that everything can be explained with the language of science and physical properties. And that would include the mind. That would include consciousness. If you're a dualist, you don't believe that because you don't think that the mind can be reduced to physical properties. And that is Nagel's position. He thinks that there is something missing, and it's probably missing because consciousness and the mind, as an entity is a little bit different than typical physical entities. It's definitely related to the brain. There's a very close relationship between the two, but they're not identical. That's what Nagel is saying.
I kind of agree with him right now.
Okay. So that's basically Nagel's position, and that's why he's. I'm not done with the argument here, his argument, but that's why he uses the examples that he uses, and I'm just following his line of argumentation.
Sorry, could you just repeat that statement again? What is Nagel's argument?
Nagel's argument is that he doesn't think that the mind or consciousness, and these two words are used interchangeably, can be reduced. In sciences, we say that when you take, so the example of water, right, can be reduced to hydrogen and oxygen properties. That means they can be explained using physical language. So water no longer becomes, it's just a common way of referring to a property that has specific chemical and physical properties. So in sciences, we say that we take one word, we take a concept and we reduce it to a different concept. So now we have a physical and a scientific theory of what water is, something that we call water commonly, okay? And the same thing with diamonds and so on and so forth, okay? So why can't we, for Nagel, the question is, why can't we do that with the mind? Why can't we give a physical account of the mind? If we can't do that, the way we can do it with water or diamonds or other things in the universe, then it must be the case that mind or consciousness, even though it's very closely related to the function of the brain, is not identical with the brain.
Okay.
Do you follow?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Could we say in short term that the reason why we can't relate the taste of chocolate consciously to water and diamonds is because it's not a physical property like water or diamonds, right?
Yes, that's Nagel's position. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So we have the brain or the body with its physical properties and states, and we have the mind. So Nagel argues that the mind or consciousness is an aspect of the body, but it's not identical with it or to it. This is called the dual aspect theory of mind. You have the material or the physical aspects of the brain and body, but you also have the mind. The mind is your consciousness. The brain, with its electrical and chemical properties, is correlated to the mind, but they are not identical. Okay, that's Nagel's position. Any questions about this position?
No.
Or how Nagel arrived at it?
Not yet. Just reading it over.
Sir, I just have a small question. So when I was learning about philosophy back home, I was actually told about idealism versus the materialism. So how does idealism play within this theory, or?
Yeah, idealism is idealism historically was a reaction to materialism and also dualism. So idealism is the theory that everything reduces to a mind, and instead of reduces to material properties. So idealists, there are very few idealists left, I think, but the idealist would say that everything that you perceive reduces to the perspective of your mind, and everything that happens in your mind reduces to a much greater mind, and you can call that mind God. So basically we are all in the mind of a much greater entity or creature or being that is called God, whatever you want God to mean. And whenever God thinks something, you think it. And then you engage in behaviors, and those behaviors can be explained physically, but really they all reduce to some sort of mind stuff. So that's, in a nutshell, that's idealism.
If I put all three on the spectrum, it's idealism and then dualism and then the materialism, something like that.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Now in the video that I have posted, a video from the great courses on philosophy of mind, you will also see Dr. Grimm go through the theories, and he also does a good job. So this is what we do.
Sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please. Can I go back to the previous slide?
No, I cannot, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So when we discuss about Nagel's dual aspect theory of mind,
yes,
I think there's some sort of connection with Platonian idea of idealism, as Lynn said before, and Aristotelian concept of form. Can you associate these ideas with this?
Plato's idea of forms?
Plato's ideas of, let's say, the Platonian idea of concept or ideal state of mind, and Aristotelian concept of form or the matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, Aristotle was a materialist, and Plato was a dualist, and also you could say idealist.
Yeah, idealist.
Yeah, Plato thought that.
So
go ahead.
So he's picking up the idea of Plato and Aristotle while trying to rationalize the idea of mind.
Nagel?
Looks like.
You're talking about Nagel, that he's doing that?
Yeah. So it looks to me that he is neoclassical.
Perhaps. I mean, of course, we all exist in the tradition of, to some extent, in the traditions, in the ancient traditions of philosophy, which whether it's ancient Greek or Chinese or Indian, or but Nagel doesn't make references. He doesn't say that my argument builds specifically on Plato's theory or Aristotle's theory, but he does make mention. He does go back to all the way back to René Descartes, which is more than 400 years ago. So
yeah, he's like Platonian in a sense. René Descartes.
Yeah, you would have
idealist.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, yeah, but Nagel does not. Nagel does not refute the fact that the human condition, or the human beings are composed of physical properties. So he's not.
Where does it?
He's not.
Is there any correlation with? Yeah, please.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Is there any correlation with René Descartes? We exist because we think, or something like the idea was there. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when Nagel says we can't separate mind from body, means mind is ideal, which is the substance that makes the identity of the body possible.
No, Nagel says, based on the evidence and based on our theories, we need to separate the mind from the body.
Okay.
That's what he's saying. Because there isn't a way, we don't have a theory that would spell out the relationship between what happens in the mind with what happens in the body, that is, the brain. The two are interconnected, but they're not identical. And the argument that I'm following here, that he unfolds in the book, is basically trying to show that that's the case. Yeah. So I know what you mean, but you are partly right and you're partly wrong. Because, Nagel is definitely a dualist. He's not a substance dualist as Descartes, but he's a dual aspect dualist theorist, because he does think that the brain is extremely important, but he thinks that the brain produces also an entity that is the mind, and it's not identical to all the features of the brain. It's something new that exists. The brain gives rise to something with its functions at some point of the workings of the brain. There is a new entity, an emergent entity, and we're going a little bit farther here, but that's okay. An emergent entity called the mind, okay? And that is definitely related to the workings of the brain, but it's not identical with all the workings of the brain because it's a new entity. It's something different altogether, okay?
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good questions. Any questions in regards to that or what I have said just a second ago?
That's okay. I just wanted to get some critical analysis of classical theory with Nagel's concept of dual aspect of theory of mind.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, there's, I mean, you can definitely write to Nagel and ask him. Yeah, you can write. He works at the University of New York, and you can look him up online and you can write to him if you like, or you can just read more of his stuff. Yeah, he's definitely in the tradition, but I don't think he's definitely in the Descartes tradition, but I'd say a lot less in Platonic or Aristotelian tradition. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so this is what's happening scientifically now. So if you go into, let's say you pick up a journal that's called, let's say, Neuroscience of Consciousness, or other Trends in Cognitive Science, or other journals in the psychological sciences or in the medical sciences, they talk about the language of they use the language of NCC, the neural correlates of consciousness. So here, the neural correlates of consciousness are spelled out in physical terms. We have specific parameters, specific imaging techniques in order to read the functioning of the brain. Okay, and that is happening somewhere in the brain. The outside world is here, right? You're looking at a man who is walking a dog, or whatever it may be, a car driving, or another person looking at you, and you're looking at them, right? This is what's happening in the brain, and you have a conscious perception of the dog, right? So you have the mind is the conscious perception. The brain is measured with specific tools, right? And then you have the outside world, okay? So what we still don't have is we don't have a theory that would put the three aspects together nicely. Okay, so the brain part, the conscious experience, and how the external world affects the brain, and how the brain gives rise to conscious perceptions. Okay. What's that? Say again? Oh, no? Okay. So that is basically, so when you go to the journals, you will definitely see this language of the neural correlates of consciousness. And they are correlates, they are close relationships, but they're not causal relationships. We're missing causal relationships. So just to give you an example, when I get up in the morning and I see that it's light outside, I could say, well, whenever I get up, it's light outside. Therefore, it must be the case that I caused the sun to go up, right? I may infer some sort of causal relationship between in the correlation that I'm experiencing. But that's not the case. We know that the cause that the sun goes up, that the sun, my perception of the sun going up has completely different mechanisms than what I think actually causes the sun to go up, right? I'm in a state of ignorance, erroneous state. I don't have the right, I don't have the right explanation of why the sun comes up. Just because I think that the two are correlated together closely, that doesn't mean that that is the explanation, okay? So
isn't it the idealism thing?
How so?
Because you think that the world goes around you, right? So it's idealism.
Yeah, it's definitely refers to the mind, but it doesn't refer full-fledgedly to the idealist theory, comprehensively, that is, because remember, some idealists think that my mind is just part and parcel of a much bigger mind, and the whole universe is part and parcel of a much bigger mind. This project of the neural correlates of consciousness does not say that. It just basically, here I'm trying to stress the fact that correlations are not causations. Let's not make the mistake that just because there's a close correlation between two entities or two properties or two events, that doesn't mean that we know exactly what causes what. Okay?
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. That's so we are in the language of correlates, and we know that that when people, we know that in neuropsychology, we know that when people suffer specific accidents, car accidents or whatever accidents, work-related accidents or sports injuries that affect their brain, that will cause specific cognitive impairments, that will have cause specific negative psychological effects or symptoms, right? So we know that there's a very close relationship, right? Now we have to study the relationship and find out exactly what is it about the hippocampus, or what is it about the limbic system or the brain stem or the prefrontal cortex that relates specifically to specific symptoms, psychological symptoms of those injuries, right? So we know that there's a close relationship, but we don't know exactly what are the true causes and effects of that relationship. So when you look at the neurons here and the firing rates, right, the language of brain studies or brain imaging, so how does the language of the perception or the understanding of what happens in the brain and our readings relate exactly to the conscious perception of the dog? What's the relationship? How are the two connected? What is it about the brain that does this, gives rise to conscious percepts? And why do we have conscious percepts and sometimes we have unconscious percepts? What's the difference? What happens in the brain exactly that distinguishes between the face of a human being as opposed to the face of a dog, and then more generally, more inclusively, the division between conscious states and unconscious states, right? Or brain states during sleep and brain states during consciousness right now, full awareness right now, right? So that is where the science of consciousness is right now, at the level of neural correlates of consciousness.
I actually have a very irrelevant question, speaking in terms of the dreams, right? So because I'm pretty sure that dreams, and I believe dreams are a project of your subconscious mind, right? But like in some of my dreams, I can consciously make a choice. Like when it's like that I'm playing a game in my dream, and I feel like that I'm consciously making a choice. How do I explain that?
That's called lucid dreaming, and LUCID. Look it up. And yes, I used to have a lot of lucid dreams like you. I no longer have them. I had them about 10 years ago, but they stopped. So for whatever reason. But lucid dreaming is a phenomenon of dreaming and phenomenon of the brain, which is quite normal. And some people can get so good at lucid dreaming that they can actually manipulate their dreams consciously while they're dreaming. But look it up, and I'm sure you're going to get some interesting answers. Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
They say lucid dreaming is actually associated with anxiety and depression. So if you had a lot of it, that means you are going through some turmoil in your waking life.
Could be. Let's not treat this as a definite answer, but there's definitely a relationship. Yes. Yeah.
So there is only a correlation between the lucid dreaming and the anxiety, but there is not a definite cause and effect relationship between them yet, right?
That's right. That's right. But there's a lot on this in the literature, so I'm sure you'll find when you go to the journals, don't just read anything online. Go to the journals and find proper scientific articles on this. Yeah, because there's also a lot of bullshit online, especially when it comes to psychology. All right. So the conclusion is the sciences, this includes neuroscience, and I'm just going to lift here, this includes neuroscience, lack an explanation of the mind or consciousness, unless future science comes up with a way to explain the mind based on all the physical components known in the universe, including the brain. The explanation of how the mind relates to the brain is pending, okay? Or the mind, what it feels like to be a conscious subject, like you right now, and myself, is a different property from any other physical property known in the universe. Thus, based on our current knowledge, we have physical properties matter, and mind, but not a clear theory of how the two relate to each other.
Have you seen the movie Lucy?
No, I haven't.
It's
I don't know what it's about.
I was actually thinking about this too. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, Lucy. Yeah, go ahead.
You're thinking about Thomas Nagel, not Lucy.
It relates to the mind, the brain, and how it projects into like the physical world.
Is it about the AI entity, Lucy, or is that the one? No,
it's a movie.
Yeah, no, I know it's a movie, but
Johansson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I haven't watched it. But I think I know. I've seen a trailer maybe a few years ago.
And there's also a part where they talk about how us humans only use about 20% of our brain capacity, and we are capable of so much more. And like dolphins, they use up to like 50 or 80% of their brain capacity. That's why they're able to use telepathy and communicate and scare off sharks and stuff.
Okay, but whenever you read something like that, you should be skeptical. Yes.
It's going to be, I am.
Good. Whenever someone says something like that, ask them, what does that mean, 20%? And why 20, not 30? And how was that measured?
Yeah, it's like saying IQ tests define our intelligence.
True. I mean, IQ tests are actually pretty good in terms of measuring, but they won't measure everything. But whenever you hear someone, say 20% or 30% or 50%, you have to think to yourself, well, what is the 100% capacity, and how do you compare that, if at all, to the current capacity? What does that mean in terms of the brain? Does it mean that three quarters of the brain are not working, or they're just barely hovering, or they're hovering below a threshold? So I'm quite skeptical whenever someone says something like that. And in the scientific literature, you don't see language like that, because it just produces a lot more problems than answers, I think. So sure, it can be part of a movie. Movies can run on many fantastical ideas, But just because an idea is in the movie, that doesn't mean it's well explained scientifically, right? It's just we're getting excited. Movies are basically, we're getting excited about the future, excited about potential, human potential, and that's nothing new. But you know, as students of IT students or computers in general, or systems, or you should be more skeptical of claims like that. But it's a fun thing to think about, definitely. I don't know how much bearing it actually has on reality, though. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't believe it. I mean, my question was like, do you think that us humans will evolve or develop our brain to be like dolphins and we can be telepathic too?
Yeah, maybe, but what does that mean, telepathic? How do we know dolphins are telepathic?
That's a good question. But
Yeah,
I thought that's how we scare off sharks.
Well, I'm sure there's ways of explaining that physically, right? Maybe, you know, maybe there's a ways of for dolphins to send sound signals or vibrations through water. Maybe they can use chemical properties that sharks either like or don't like. You know, so fish will produce specific behavior that will cascade through water, whether it's auditory or vibrations that are registered by specific receptors, right? And if human beings interpret that as telepathic, then they have to be really careful not to overstate their interpretations. Do you follow?
Yeah.
So yeah, dolphins are extremely intelligent, and they are very interesting creatures, just like great apes and chimps and other creatures as well. And I'm sure there's a lot we don't know about them, but from a critical thinking perspective, I would usually be skeptical. And there's also the error of anthropomorphizing. That is, we as human beings, we like to attribute traits to animals that are human or uber human or extra human or superhuman, and but that could just be a projection. That could just be an erroneous interpretation. It doesn't mean that it has any bearing on reality. So we do that on a regular basis. We get excited, basically, and sometimes we say things that are not actually there.
Okay.
I'm not saying that to take the wind out of your sail. I'm not trying to say that to burst your bubble, but I'm saying it as basically from a philosophical, sober perspective. And people make this mistake on a regular basis. Scientists will also make this mistake when they interpret things, and they have to be careful not to get overly excited about their interpretations, let alone the person. Yeah.
You remind me a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, well, Neil, thank you. I take that as a compliment. And I'm nowhere close to Neil deGrasse, but yeah, I definitely have. My position is realistic and skeptical, and I think instead of getting overly excited about concepts like that, but you know, movies and literature will provide specific food for thought, and that's great. You know, I like to fantasize as well, but we also have to, you know, remember, you know, how do we operationalize the theory? You know, how do we explain it? How do we measure it? You know, what does it really mean, right? So once you start thinking in those terms critically like that, sometimes the stuff that people say, or journalists or media or scientists, sometimes you can pretty quickly, you know, dissect what they have to say and see whether it holds any water, right? So as a philosopher and a psychologist, that's usually my position. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any questions to the conclusion that Nagel arrives to, or the alternative? Let's see if there's anything else. Are the conclusions clear to you?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm with Nagel.
I'm with Nagel. Now, of course, you can be with Nagel, you can be against Nagel, right? It's just because Nagel says something that doesn't mean his argument is bulletproof. You can definitely find problems in his argument, and but it would be hard, but it's possible. I mean, anything can be criticized as long as you have the right evidence and the right logic to support your claims. So that's basically Nagel's position. And I wanted to start with the Nagel's position because I think it nicely paints the picture of the mind-body problem, and then it paves the way for all the topics that we will discuss. Because everything that we will discuss for the rest of the course will be related to the mind and related to the brain.
Sir, out of curiosity, will you be developing your own theory one day?
Yeah, I am developing actually my own theory, and but it's I already have there are some publications out there that you can read, but I'm actually working on a new project, but that's related to specific brain parts and functions. So when I'm done, I can share it with you. But
I'm excited to know.
Sure, thanks. But I think I am a materialist. I'm a materialist who thinks that the theory is pending. I don't think that dualism is actually true. So, but that's my position.
So you also think that like because of the current, let's say, technology available, we're unable to explain everything yet, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the theory is pending. We are in the unknown. Therefore, the language of the mind fits the gap of the unknown well. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Therefore, again, it's good to be skeptical. It's good to be of the position. Let's see what the evidence shows. Let's see what our best logical argumentation and evidence has to offer, right? And then make our minds about the final conclusions. But most of you could be dualists, materialists. So out of curiosity, how many of you are dualists at the moment?
I would say that I'm not a definite dualist, but it seems like that at the present state, it best describes what I understand or what I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you mean like dual aspect theorist or substance dualist?
I'll need to look up the definitions of those two again because I am not 100% sure, but I would say the dual aspect theory.
Okay, so you're closer, you're definitely aligning with Nagel's position.
Well, it's easier to pick sides than developing a side on my own, right?
Definitely is. It's much harder to come up with a theory of one's own, especially when it comes to the mind and the brain. It's a difficult subject, but very interesting.
Yep, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Are there any diehard materialists or maybe diehard dualists?
I haven't made up my mind yet, to be honest.
You're agnostic.
Yeah, I call it neutral as of right now.
That's all right. That's fine. Nothing
Yeah,
wrong
I
with
haven't decided either. I just want to research more because there are so many things that are contradicting in my mind. I need to know more to pick a side.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking out of curiosity. I'm not asking you to defend your position.
But I'm closer to dualism, and I think that I agree with Nagel at this point of time.
I understand why. Yeah, I agree with Nagel.
Or maybe there's
then we split.
Right, or maybe there's a fourth side, right? There is not dualist, materialist, or what Nagel's saying, there's maybe a fourth we don't know, right? Or a fifth, or
Could be.
there's a lot to be looked at and reviewed, or just about to be discovered, or there's so much unanswered questions, right?
There are, yeah, and that's what makes it exciting to work on some of these problems for scientists or philosophers. Yeah, I think you're right, and but there, when you start getting into the literature, and you won't have to do that for this class. But if we were to do a more advanced class in philosophy of mind, we would start looking at each of the arguments, because when it comes to dual aspect theory, you might have different types of versions of dual aspect theory, and which would have different arguments on the relationship between mind states and brain states, right? A good theory would still need to show exactly how they relate to each other or how they differ, right? So within the literature, if you are interested in that kind of stuff ever in the future, if you find time, you can definitely go to the journals in philosophy of mind, and then you'll find lots of food for thought on various combinations of dualism or materialism.
Right. I think being a materialist, like you're leaning towards that, like you said, I think it's fair, because it's almost like show it to me physically, prove it to me physically, right? And you want that to be shown to you, not in a spiritual aspect, but how the science kind of shows you this is a definite, clear-cut one or two answers, and that's it. And that's respectable, right?
Yeah, that's right. So in such theories, and in dualism, there is room for spirituality and the notion of spirit or soul, right? But in materialism, there isn't, because everything reduces to material states, and spirits are not supposed to be material, right?
It's very cut and dry. It's very, this is what it is. It's right in front of you. You can touch it, you can feel it, or you can see it, right?
Or you can measure it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because how do you measure a spirit, right? It's not a concept that is scientific, because it cannot be measured scientifically, right? Therefore, it would fall into a more dualistic perspective. That's right. Yeah.
And this goes back to Nagel saying you have to separate your mind and your consciousness. That's his argument, right? Like,
yes,
to separate the two.
Separate the two, because we don't have a scientific explanation for the mind. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys have really well entertained these topics. I'm really happy to see that and to hear that. Let me just I'm just gonna minimize this. Oh, where is it? I don't know why it's not working right now. Let me just stop sharing for a second. Oh, okay. Okay, and show. Okay, so back to the class. So that is basically the conceptual introduction to the first week. Let me just go back to the content. So your next topic is happiness. We're going to look closer at what's called neuroeudaimonia, and eudaimonia is basically a Greek Aristotelian word. It means happiness, and neuro, well, you have an idea what it means. It means neurons. So that is the first that is week number 2, and your first discussion board. So that's basically your homework for next week. Any questions in regards to that?
Not in regards to that, actually. I just want to know, do we need a textbook? Is it mandatory to have a textbook in this class?
No, there's all the articles are posted on eCentennial.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And do we have a discussion board for the what we just discussed? For like the brain
No,
and mind?
because yeah, I wanted to create one, but then that would push us back and we wouldn't be able to cover other theories because we have a 13-week semester as opposed to 14 weeks. So we're starting from week 2, and I just, for today, I just had a discussion with you, a very pleasant discussion that is, but I'm not going to include an online discussion because that would just push our weeks back and we wouldn't be able to finish everything.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So we're starting with happiness next week. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well then, if you don't have any other questions, I know the chat is here populated with many different interesting things, but also jokes. I won't be able to respond to all of them, but some of you are having fun here. That's good. And a lot of you have engaged the discussion and the topics and the problems quite well, so I'm happy to see that. Thank you for that. Please go over Nagel's short description, the 10-page description of the mind-body problem, now that you know what it is about, and also the video that I have posted. And then do the happiness article, engage in discussions, and I will also engage with you. So with that being said, we're done for today. If you don't have any other questions, if you do, please go right ahead.
Good for now.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you for your participation. And I will see you next week on Thursday and online.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, sir.
Do
widzenia.
Bye.
widzenia.
See you next.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
Sir, out of curiosity, is your first name Lucas kind of Hungarian as well?
No, it's
The
Polish.
spelling looks like, oh, it's Polish. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it could be Hungarian too. It's not a Polish.
Yeah, because Z together pronounced as S, right? So it's just a very distinctive Hungarian pronunciation. That's why I ask.
Yeah, it's still a Slavic language, so we have those SZ combinations. You're right, but it's an Italian name. It's just the SZ connection is a Polish twist on an old Italian name.
Oh, cool. Good to know. All the Eastern European language are kind of similar anyways.
They are. That's true. Yeah.
Nope. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.